Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Epic Vision Zone. My name is Jane Applegath, a former award-winning stockbroker, television producer, script writer, yoga instructor, and serial entrepreneur, now founder of the Epic Vision Zone. Each show, we offer you an inspiring person or message to bring you closer to your big dream by showing you how to enter the portal to your new reality, where possibilities, prosperity, potential, and your epic life reign. Thank you so much for being here today. Our guest this afternoon is Gary C. Laney. He says that your sphere of influence is the essential ingredient in your recipe for success, respect, and a legacy. Gary Laney is a two-time best-selling author, a serial entrepreneur, former high-tech executive, CEO of Success Masters, and a dynamic speaker who has inspired tens of thousands of entrepreneurs and business and sales professionals with personal and professional success training. Known for his ability to turn around businesses and create dynamic revenue growth, Gary's strategic process shows you how to seek out and align yourself with intentional influencers by using transformational connection techniques to integrate empathy and trust into business relationships. The results: improved performance and insights about how to restructure your organization to reach its full potential. His national best-selling book, The Power of Strategic Influence, which is fabulous, by the way, delivers powerful insights and wisdom on the value and need for human influence. Packed with treasured stories that bring to life his visionary spheres of leadership, relationships, perspective, and much more, his book will inspire and influence you to live your greatest life. Prior to his entrepreneurial run, Gary spent 25 years as an executive in corporate high-tech and commercial publishing. He has a triple major MBA from Northwestern Kellogg in finance, marketing, and policy. Welcome, Gary. I am so honored to have you here with us today.
Well, Jane, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you, finally meet you, and excited about our discussion.
Yes, absolutely. I am as well. As I said, I've been reading the book, and I am really excited to delve into this topic of influence. So before we get started in there, give me an idea of what inspired you to do the work that you do today.
That's an interesting question because I've had four different careers in my life. So what inspired me to do what I'm doing today? I think it's really been an evolution from the beginning. I was really, my entire life has been filled with titles and roles where I've served other people, both on a personal basis, a religious basis, and business basis. And so, I think it's an evolution of me finally being at that point in my life where I can just focus on things I really care about. I'm not at anyone's beck and call, to be obligated in some form or fashion or even direction. So, I mean, it's really people that motivate me. It's my family. It's the things that I love doing. And really, when it comes down to it, helping other people succeed, get past their personal issues, and be more fulfilled. And I've done that a lot. I've coached a lot of people. I've managed a couple of thousand sales and support people in my lifetime. And so it. And by the way, maybe we'll get into this, but I've been inspired by so many great people in my life. I've met the likes of Stephen Covey, who was a mentor of mine for years, and other people like him. So we'll see where we go with this, but I'm happy to answer any questions that might be related.
Well, thank you for that. I can certainly relate because I have myself been a serial entrepreneur. And as you could see from the opening, the span of different industries that I have delved into, from the creative to the spiritual to the financial. But what it does, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I used to think I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none, which I didn't view very favorably.
No.
But now, looking back, it's given me the tools to do what I do today. And likewise, I see that with you, and especially I can see that in the book as well. And we'll get into that. So yeah, thank you for that insight, because I can certainly understand where that amalgam of all of those different industries and positions have brought together the fabulous teaching that you do today. So
Well,
speaking
I
of the
might
book, go ahead.
go right ahead. I was just going to say it's the versatility that makes you interesting to me. I think our backgrounds, the ability to be able to pivot and do things. I think I don't really care what industry I'm in as long as I love the process, the people, and the products. It really doesn't matter to me. So thank you for that, and thank you for reading my book. By the way, it's an honor to be interviewed by someone that actually took my book seriously. So thank you.
My pleasure. Like I said, I can't wait to delve into it, because there are so many nuggets in here that people are going to be eye-opening for everyone, for sure. So, speaking of the book, what inspired you to author your book, The Power of Strategic Influence?
Well, so I mentioned Stephen Covey, right? Back when I was in my 20s, um, I had the opportunity to read one of his books. It's a book you probably not have heard of before. It's called Spiritual Roots of Human Relations. He was an organizational behavior expert. And I read that at a time when I was living in Europe, and it just really took me by surprise that there's something to knowing how to develop relationships with people so that it's a meaningful, win-win type of situation. So hence his win-win concept. I then became a student of his in a big class of 400 students. Was This is before the Donahues of the world, but he was like someone that could get out in a crowd of 400 people and connect with people instantly and make something meaningful out of that experience, even though you're in such a large crowd. Finally, I went to work for a company where he became an advisor. And so for the next 10 years, I had the opportunity to be in management sessions where he taught us. I got to get to know him personally, got to know his wife, Sandra. And so Stephen was the start of, and the person that hired me to get to know Stephen Schallenberger. Those two people gave me access to people for the first time in my life that were influential. That blew my mind as far as conceptual ideas, what you can do in life, not to be inhibited by your own personal limitations, to not let self-imposed negativity stop you from achieving things. And so for the next 35 years, I'm dating myself a little bit. I've been teaching concepts from Stephen Covey, from Dennis Waitley, from Earl Nightingale, from Zig Ziglar, because I manage a lot of salespeople. I haven't always been a sales person, manager, executive, but majority of my career was in that. And so over the years, I extended those principles. I created my own principles that were more tactical to the things I was doing and the people I was managing. And then so I've wanted to, for 15 years, with all these different roles I've had, to write a book. I knew it was going to be about influence. Later on, I decided to call it strategic influence. We can talk about why that matters. But I was inspired during COVID, if you want to know the truth. I just sold my company called Trustegrity. It was a networking company. And I had nothing to do. I thought for 6 months, I thought COVID would last for 6 months. How long did you think it would last?
Not as
um,
long as it did.
and it hasn't stopped, right? So I thought I had 6 months, so I laid out a plan. And I'll tell you what really got me going, what really motivated and got me off the stick was three women in my life: my wife, Carla, my daughter, Kylie, and my granddaughter, uh, Katie, who has written a book and published it and is in the process of now publishing her second book at 20 years old, if you can believe that. So they were involved in writing, and they said, Dad, you have nothing to do. Why don't you follow us and write for the next few weeks? And so I took the challenge. I said, man, this is probably the first time I've ever had the chance or time to do it. I got involved. The first chapter didn't go well, I didn't think, and so I stopped the process. I had an editor, a story researcher, and I said, let me take time to get to know myself a little bit before I finish the book or continue. So I did two things. One, I took the time to do a survey with hundreds of leaders to find out what the current thinking was about influence. That was number one, and leadership. And number two, I stayed up all night one night and mapped out what I call a table of contents roadmap. And so the next morning, after 2 hours of sleep, I got up and said, I finally have my act together. Now I can pull the team together and we can just move through this, I think, efficiently. And that was the case. every week we were pumping out a chapter. And so within 3 months, the book was written. Then we did all the, the aspects that come with a book, the artwork, the graphics, the illustrations, the book cover, the editing, all that stuff. And so 6 months later, we had a book. And so that's kind of how it all happened. That's the process. But really motivated because of the three women in my life that really got me going.
Well, yes, we have a habit of doing that. We know we can feel in our hearts that this is the path that maybe you should be taking at this time. But what I loved about that story, Gary, was that you said, first off, you said, let me get to know myself first,
Yeah,
which was
yeah,
really interesting, because many of us who have never tackled a book or maybe started and then stopped, it really is an exploration of not just yourself, but of all your experiences and all of the learning that you've had over the years, and what the focus needs to be. And I love that you said that you built that blueprint, and from that blueprint you were able to take off, because that was the structure basically that allowed you to just bang it out in a very I say quickly, a very quick time, because it is substantial. The book is a nice thick. I've got a copy of it right here, and it's a substantial
yeah.
book. So yeah, kudos to you. Yes,
Thank you.
COVID gave a lot of people opportunities to do things and take them out of their wheelhouse. So thank you for that insight. Now,
Well,
influence,
thank you.
speaking of that,
Yes.
oh, and I loved your story also of how you got started with the two, with Cubby, and how they influenced you. I'm very tuned into this now.
Most certainly did.
So,
Yeah, very, very much so.
yeah. So that being said, what is your definition of influence? Because in today's high tech world and social media, a lot of people believe that your social media influencers are valuable, but there is a big difference from social media influence and business influence, and it is huge. So if you could share that with our audience, that would be great.
Well, thank you. I have to kind of step backward to explain my view of influence. I mean, influence is having access to great and wonderful and very reputable people, in my view. But um, when I decided to name the book, I decided I didn't want it to be The Power of Influence for two reasons. One, there's books out there called that. And secondly, I wanted to distinguish between what you just mentioned, and that's social media. Nothing wrong with social media. It's very powerful. I think every company has to have social media, in their marketing plan. But but to me, social media influence is transactional. It's short term. It's the here and now. That's why we have so many selfies and things that are happening at the moment. So it's kind of real time kind of stuff, and I love that. But my book is about how to identify and gain the attention of highly influential people who can help you succeed. So that's really the critical piece. So how do you do that? Well, in order for me to get involved with someone, I want it to be long term. I want it to be strategic to me and them. It has to be win-win, like Stephen Covey talks about. Strategic means that it has to be fitted. It has to fit the mold of the company that you're running, and the person getting involved has to understand that, have a background that relates to it, and have a commitment to help you on a strategic basis. If I hire The Rock, and I would love to, he's probably too expensive for me to hire, and he mentions anything about me, I might get 4 or 5 million hits one time. But he may not know anything about networking or about people or about developing reputation. I think he does, but I don't think on a business level he would relate to me or my book or my company that I'm running. So backing it up, that's the reason I called it strategic influence. How do you make things on a strategic level that makes sense for you and the people involved? And more importantly than, so I mentioned that that premise of my book about how to identify, that's number one. How do you gain attention? Number two, of highly influential people who can help you succeed. Those aren't even the two hardest parts. The most difficult part is how do you cultivate a relationship with someone who's
Mm.
highly influential, who is strategic to you, who can open doors you can't open for yourself. That's really the critical piece. If you can do that, you've won the game. And by the way, one last thing is you cannot have a myriad of influential people in your life. First of all, it'd be very difficult to do that. Everybody wants access to these people. And two, you can only really have a very strong and tight relationship with a few people. And so, yes, you work to get followers, you make connections every day, you look for potential partnership opportunities, and then you look for those special, 4, 5, 6 people that really can make a difference to you and you to them.
Yes, it that has so much powerful information packed into it, because you are absolutely right. I do find that the social media is more transactional. The business influencers almost become like lifelong mentors or lifelong friends, even in that case, where they help you, they mentor you, they might sponsor you, but they also inspire you. And so I completely understand the difference, and I'm grateful that you distinguish that for our audience, because there is a big difference between the two. And speaking of that, you may have already answered this question, but what is the most important quality an influencer should have or cultivate?
Um, you asked me a lot of hard questions. Let me answer it this way. So, in my book, you may have not gotten to it yet, but in Success Factor 8, I talk about um, competitive competencies that you have to have as a leader to be successful. There are dozens and dozens of competencies that a leader could have and possess, acquire, but not everybody possesses them all. In fact, I have another book I'm writing, and we're going to be talking about superpowers, because everybody
Mm.
has a superpower that they're really, really super good at, and that's the one thing that distinguishes them, and that's why people follow them. But I think you still have to have a sampling and some level of competency in several areas, several traits and characteristics. So I have 10 in the first book. The next book I've identified through several other surveys up to 30 that people think are really critical if you want to be a really successful, effective, influential, and strategic leader. And so, but I will mention the one that keeps boiling to the top, and one I just wrote about in my newsletter this week called Influential Leadership on LinkedIn, is emotional intelligence.
Mm.
I have not always understood that concept. And one thing I distinguished in my newsletter, it was yesterday, is that EQ, the emotional quotient, or emotional intelligence, does not mean you're just a nice person. That is a symptom. That is an outcome of a person that is considerate, who stops, who thinks, who tries to understand a situation and tries to make it so that it's good for everyone. But I came up with three principles that kind of simplify this very, I think, complicated concept of emotional intelligence. First one is being patient. So a leader who is patient, a leader who has empathy, and a leader who has humility. Doesn't mean you're not confident. It's very related to another competency that came up in my surveys, and that's being humbly confident. Tom Ziglar, who's the son of the great Zig Ziglar, during an interview that I did with him for my book, said that Ken Blanchard had told him one time what leadership was, and he said it's being humbly confident, which they seem to oppose each other. Someone who's humble and who's confident. Well, you want someone to be excited and be confident and be a great leader, but at the same time, you want them to be considerate and conscious about the people they work with, to have humility in times of humility, and to be understanding when it's needed, but at the same time be inclusive. So I got too many things to talk about. I'm going to say emotional intelligence is probably the one I'd like to focus on.
Yes, I could see that. Where my mind was going, and very much in line with that, was mindset. But
Yes.
certainly, emotional intelligence is, when you dig into that topic, it encompasses so much. And I love that, humbly confident, because leadership is going to take a big shift in the future. Well, we're already in that realm right now, but I do
We are.
believe that the role of leadership it's got to change, or your corporation will be in jeopardy, because the whole concept of leadership and being a hierarchy is changing. But what you said, in essence, with emotional intelligence, with empathy, and patience, and that sort of thing, because I do, like you, come from the school of back in the day when the leader was like barking orders, and you did your job. and, and I'm not sure
Very
that's going
true.
to work with the generation.
No. Well, we have this great resignation, they call it, going on right now.
Yeah.
Gallup says that by the end of the year, 60 some percent are considering leaving their jobs. And I
Yeah.
recently interviewed for my next book a guy named, amazing guy named Nando Cicerone. He's the president USA of UPS. I flew out to Atlanta, met him at the world headquarters, interviewed him, and we talked about this concept about leadership and people leaving their jobs. And he said, "Well, Gary, people don't leave their jobs." I said, "What do you mean, Nando?" He says, "They leave their leaders."
Mm.
So they're not happy with the way they're being treated, the way they're not being included, they're not getting credit, they're not being involved in some kind of collaborative exercise that allows them to feel like the decision and the ownership they're a part of. Leaders, from the past want to take credit for it and want to run and push ahead without any consequence, and that's not going to work today. It's just not going to.
Right. Oh my gosh, that is wow. I love that. They're not leaving their job, they're leaving their leaders. And therein
Yeah.
lies your emotional intelligence. All of those things that you just mentioned. Spot on. By the way, I love the stories in your book, and they bring everything that you're teaching to life. I just wanted to mention that. So I'm really curious what the law of attraction and influence have to do with each other. You had a piece in your book in reference to that. So maybe give us some insight into how those two come together.
Yeah, so let's just kind of back up a little bit. So law of attraction means to some people that if you think it, it'll happen. It's just magically going to happen if you just think it. And I think that there's an element of that, of having a positive outlook, setting goals, getting people involved. But there's much to do about action as well in the law of attraction. When you do things that people like, they're attracted to you, and other things seem to happen because you start building momentum. People start to get involved, and that's where the attraction thing really happens. And if you get followers that like what you said the first time, but then you act and show them that it's actually possible to repeat and give them more evidence of the philosophy you're talking about, they'll want to wait for the second time. And if they start to use it and it actually works, they'll want to come back for the third time. So influence has a lot to do, I think, with attraction. I mean, physical attraction is one thing. Philosophical attraction is another thing. Your competency and your expertise is another thing. It's really a comprehensive, I think, solution to get to that thing we call, it sounds so simple, as attraction. Because if it's not sustainable, the attraction really wasn't really real in the first place, I don't think. It might be a short term, I liked it, it's interesting, and I never come back to it. So what's the substance that's involved, and what makes it interesting for me to stay with you long term? And I think that's what
Right.
strategic influence is about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're in order to be an influencer, excuse me, you would want to be attracting individuals and vice versa. So, yes, it makes sense in that respect. And tell us then what positive value influencers, why they should you should know them, because there is a difference. There's you how you call them positive value or influencers with positive value, why you should know them, an exercise that can help people get started. You have a great exercise in your book, which isn't difficult to do, but I would never have thought of doing it until I read your book.
Why don't you share with me which one you're talking about before, so I don't go down the
Yeah.
wrong path?
Sure. It's about making a list of people you want to meet.
Right, right, right.
I love
So,
that.
so
That's so
yeah. So
simple.
listen, I'm a sales guy from the word go. I'm more strategic than that today, but if you want to do something with people, you have to have a target list. And the target, and before you have a target list, you have to have a profile. So let's start with a profile. What kind of people make sense for me to get involved with, and consequently, people that I can add value to. If I am introduced to somebody that's fantastic, that's great for me, but they don't see value on a reciprocal basis, it won't last past the first meeting. So positive value. Let's talk about value, Jane, because there are really three kind of running themes in my book that I think are really worth talking about. And that the first one is value, personal value. Each of us has or has to have a personal level of value to attract other people, going back to that attraction model. For me, personal value is the subset of three things. It's education, and we all have to have education. It's experience. That gives you the ability to request, some compensation because now you have experience, and then expertise is what makes people want to keep you around because you can actually solve problems. And so we'll start with that personal value, which gives you when you go to an employer for the first time and say, I'd like to be hired. This is a position I'm interested in, and I think I can add value. What does that mean? I'm adding value because my education, my experience, my expertise. So back to the people that we want to gain access to, that we want to identify, gain access to, and then cultivate a relationship with. So profile, I need to figure out what's the right kind of person that will relate to me, my company, and my customers. Second of all is target list. How do I identify those people? Well, I ask people, I do my own research, I come up with a list, just like you talked about. Next is how do you gain access to these people? Most often, the best way is through a warm introduction. Find someone who trusts you, that knows somebody you want to be connected to. They have to trust you in order to feel comfortable to introduce you in a way that makes it a warm introduction. If you have a warm introduction, then the person on the other side, because they trust the first person, might say, well, if there's somebody you trust, then I certainly probably can trust them as well. So I'll give you an example, because my book is probably the best way to explain it. When I first started, I thought I'd like to have a few people in my book that are highly influential, that can exemplify the concepts that I'm trying to teach. After I had interviewed three people, they were offering, because they thought it was such a great experience, our interview, to introduce me to other people. So for example, Brian Esposito, who's in my book, he's a great friend. I've known him for 20 years. He used to be one of my clients years ago. At the end of our conversation, Brian said, do you need other people to interview? I said, well, yeah, I do. And I don't know how many I'm going to interview, but ultimately I had 12 chapters. I decided I had to have 12. And of course, I wanted to have 6 women and 6 men. And then different varieties of industries, different cultural backgrounds. I mean, all that was important to me in this book, so it could relate to most anyone. And so Brian says, okay, well, I will make a list of people what you're looking for. And he did ask me kind of my profile. Next thing I noticed, he's throwing these names at me. And one of those names was Larry Namer. Larry Namer was the co-founder of a company called E Entertainment, ETV, which is a multi-billion-dollar company today. He was the co-founder of that company. Of course, I said yes. Now, it was an entertainment. I'm not an entertainment guy, even though I was in a band once upon a time. I'm not really. That wasn't my profession. But Larry had this startup story that was phenomenal, that I thought would really work well for my book. And more importantly, during our interview, I learned from him that he gives back. My last chapter is about giving back. I said, oh, Larry he'd be the perfect fit for my last chapter. What's interesting is I started to interview people, they learned about my book. They said, now you're assigning people to chapters? And I said, yes. And they said, well, I'd love to be in this chapter because I think it relates to me. And so the matching became very interesting. Our relationships grew because of that. And I think our interviews were much more engaging because we were trying to help each other. And so again, the formula, identify, gain access, and cultivate. Cultivate to me means I have to bring back to the value thing. I have to bring value so that you would want to spend time with me after our first introduction. Introductions are not the easiest thing to get, but it's much easier than trying to gain access to someone on a long-term basis. How do you cultivate a relationship so they would say, let's schedule a next meeting? And if you can get to that point where you've identified something that's important to them that you can do for them, you should do it first. You shouldn't wait. You shouldn't go in and say, I have a list of things I'd like to get from you now that I have access to you. And they would show you the door. But
No
people think
kidding.
sometimes people think that's possible. It's not. You have to go in with a plan that says, I know I've done my research. I know what I can do that they want, that would make sense to them. And what it does, when you do something for someone in the beginning of a relationship, it builds instant trust, at least for now.
Right.
They all of a sudden want to be with you, and they have some interest in sacrificing some of their day or their time with you. So that's a simple formula, and there's 5 steps to it. But thank you for mentioning that. I think that's really what I'm trying to accomplish with people.
Yes. Oh, that was incredible. The trust. Once you build that trust, then you have a person that will want to help you. And I love because there's a process there so that people, anyone and everybody from entrepreneurs to people who are established in business, because like you, I have been in sales. It was the stock brokerage industry, and I had to make lists
Yeah.
as well. But at that
Okay.
point in my life, I never thought of influencers. And thinking back, boy, that would have been a huge help. It was cold calling. We didn't have the cell phones, et cetera, or the emails. It was basically, here's your phone and here's your desk. I'll see you later. But certainly once I actually, now that I think back, once I did build trust and a relationship with those clients, they began to refer other individuals. So
Well,
you're
yeah.
absolutely right that resonates. And I think of entrepreneurs because I love to inspire and provide knowledge and resources for female entrepreneurs. And this is so vital. Make a list and then find somebody who knows them and start making introductions for people to help you. That's one of the things that I love to do here on the Epic Vision Zone, because I do have the ability to connect with individuals like yourself. And then I'll come across someone who is in need of some advice or how to scale their business or how to do something with reference to their growth. And I'll say, well, you know what, I know so and so, let me see if I can connect you with them and possibly they can help you. So absolutely, that is I think that a terrific lesson that I learned, and I just smiled when I read it. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so simple, stupid, why didn't I think of it?
Well, Jane, in my book, I have a concept called center of influence, and Stephen Covey used to talk about circle of influence, a
Ah,
center of influence. But to me, a center of influence, and you're a center of influence because of your show, because of your background, because of your expertise, because of your success, and people see that, and you are a conduit, that makes it possible for other people to connect. And so you are a person of influence, and you have the ability to make or break probably some people just because they know you. So it's an interesting concept. It doesn't have to be a selfish concept, because I think the more you give, the more you get. Uh,
yes.
but uh, but I think it's an important concept. Everybody should learn how to do.
Absolutely. And as you could tell by making your phone calls, people were on board. I love that. Oh my gosh, where they're like, well, I think I fit into this. I don't know about you, but I would be smiling. I'm going, wow, this is really a hot topic. I've stumbled upon something really great here. So just, that was a great story. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of personal driving forces and things that move us, you have a quote in your book by Tony Robbins, and I just like to read it because he says, there is
Sure.
a powerful driving force inside every human being that once unleashed, you can make any vision, dream, or desire a reality. Why do you name driving force as one of the success factors in your book, and how do we leverage it?
So that's success factor 7, and so to me, it boils down to one word. It's called purpose. But I don't just mention one. I say driving forces, because all of us have different roles in life. You're a leader, you're a father, you're a daughter, you're a wife, you're a mother. So every role you have to figure out, like I said at the beginning, what does this mean to me? Why am I doing it? There's a guy that I interviewed in my book. His name is Gary Kennedy. Gary was the first president of Oracle USA. So he was in one of the like number 8 employee, with Larry Ellison back in the day. And his interview went a different direction I thought it would go. I thought we'd talk about leadership and startup stuff. It boiled down to talking about what was really important to him, and that is before he does something, before he accepts an assignment as a chairman, a board advisor, a CEO, or even someone that's helping people on the side, he always stops and asks himself, if I do this, can I make a difference?
Mm.
That's his driving force. That's his purpose. If he feels like he can make a difference, then he'll consider it. And then if he does it, he wants to do it in a way that makes sense, that really makes a difference. My dad always said, if you're going to do something, you might as well do it well. Why would you just waste your time doing something that you can't do well at, even if you want to do it? Why don't waste people's time? Do something you're passionate about, that you have the ability to make an impact with. That's real influence, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And your driving force. It's interesting that you say that, make a difference, because I posted 3 questions to ask yourself the beginning of the year, and it said, if you knew you could make a difference, what would you do? That was my number 1
Wow,
question.
love it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because we always say, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? And for me, that rings a little negative. I mean, I know
I
failure is fertilizer, and we learn from our mistakes, but I thought, no, and possibly what happened is your book influenced me, because I know in your book you say influence is about doing good. It's about making a difference for the good or the better,
Yeah,
to improve someone's life, to improve a situation, a company, etc. So yes, I did. I said, if you knew you could make a difference, what would you do? So that's really interesting. But thank you for that
that's fantastic.
information. So knowing the company that you keep, why is it
Yeah.
important to surround yourself with big thinkers? And this is really vital for a lot of individuals, because sometimes we have the naysayers that stick around, and they play a head trip on us. And I'd like to get your opinion on why this is so vital to be aware of the company you keep, and why big thinkers.
Well, I want to start before I get to big thinkers. I want to talk about the value thing again. So one of the concepts I talk about is before you make your list, figure out who are the grifters in your life and push those out. You don't want people that are going to try to take advantage of you for their own personal preferences. Number 2 are people with potential value, and then other people you just know there's value because you've had experience with them, you know them, and you have the ability. You think if you got involved to have something come come out wonderful and have a great outcome. So, but big thinkers, I mean, when you ask that question, I think, well, small thinkers, do I want to spend my time with small thinkers? I mean, people that don't really care about, you know, great things. I mean, great things can happen because people envision great things and then they create a plan to go after it. And I don't care who you are. But for me, it wasn't until I started to be um, in the same room with some big thinkers that this really made a difference to me. So Stephen Covey, again, back in 1979 is when I met him for the first time. And it was amazing to see how he had a different perspective about life, about relationships, about, importance that everything be win-win, that it's reciprocal, that it's not just about you. That was a big concept for me. And then I got through the company I was working for, Eagle Systems at the time. Stephen Schallenberger, who was the CEO, gave me access to Dennis Waitley, to Earl Nightingale, to Zig Ziglar, to Doug Snar, to Charlie Tremendous Jones. I can keep going on. Bob Richards, who was the gold medalist pole vaulter. And I had to stop for a second and just tell you, maybe the first time though that I ever got access to someone who was a big thinker and a big accomplished person was when I was in high school. I don't talk about this very often, but in high school I did 3 sports. I did wrestling, track, and football. And I did drama because I love drama too. I was very very active as a high school student, and it was my experience in wrestling that just blew my mind because I had the opportunity when I was a junior in high school. I was winning about half of my matches, which isn't too bad, but I wanted to be a champion. And so one day I get a call from my coach who had never wrestled in his life, and that was one of the reasons I don't think I was as good as should be, because he didn't know how to teach it. But he had tried to give us access to people that could teach us. I'll give you the nutshell version of this story. So he calls me one day and says, there's a camp coming up in Salt Lake City at the University of Utah, and Dan Gable is going to be the main instructor there. Have you ever heard of Dan Gable?
No.
You have not? Oh, wow. So this will be a treat for you, maybe. So Dan Gable in 1972 won the gold medal against 6 opponents worldwide, global opponents in his category, wrestling category, by not giving up a single point to any of them. So not a single wrestler that wrestled him in that Olympics where he got gold scored a single point against him. And I knew that. I'd been following him. He was the epitome of the greatest athlete in the world, I thought. And so the chance to go to a wrestling camp and actually meet the guy, get trained by him as a student, that was doing okay, an okay wrestler. But I had bigger ideas for myself. So I went to that camp, the short story of it. And during the first day there, the coach that was in charge of the camp, his name was Myron Roderick, famous Oklahoma State wrestling coach, came up to me and he said, Gary, says, I'd like you to be Dan Gable's escort tomorrow when he arrives in the morning. I go, are you kidding me? So I show up the next morning. I met Dan where I was supposed to meet him, and they told me I was supposed to take him, get him checked in, take care of him, make sure he had what he needed, and then come back to the camp. So I did. I met him, shook hands, grabbed one of his duffel bags. We went off on this, the sidewalks towards his dorm where we're going to put him. I can't imagine being in a dorm room these days because he's famous. But I on the way there, it took us 20 minutes to walk there. I had a chance to get to know this guy. He was very low key. He is world famous, but very low key. But I happened to ask a very stupid question along the way, which has never left my system, and that is, he lost one match in his entire career. It was in college. It's his last match of his college career, and he lost by 2 points to a guy named Larry Owens. And so I said, Dan, I heard you lost a match one time. What happened?
Oh.
Of all the stupid questions I could ask, one of the greatest athletes that's ever lived on this earth, and he really was. He later on became a coach of Iowa State. His team won 97% of their matches over a 21-year period. Over a 21-year period. They won 10 nationals, NCAAs. I could just go on and on about this guy because I actually met him and got to spend time with him. But he just responded to me during that dumb question by saying, Gary, I had a bad day. And he never had a bad day before or after, by the way, ever. Won everything. Lost one match in his entire career. So though you might not appreciate wrestling, you have to appreciate the story and the person that I'm talking about, who blew my mind, who made me understand that there was more to your potential than you probably ever thought possible. And I went to that 1 week of training, got to wrestle him several times. I went undefeated that week. First time in my life I'd ever gone undefeated, with 7 or 8 matches. And that next year I went undefeated the entire year. That was from having access to a big thinker, an amazing specimen or center of influence that became important in my life. And so to answer your question, why wouldn't you? Why would you spend your time with small thinkers if you had the opportunity to strive and gain access to people that are big thinkers? Long way to get your answer, but that's how I feel about it.
No, stories are so exciting, and they bring the inspiration, because you can see and feel that, obviously he had a huge impact on you, as opposed to if you switched the story and said, well, I walked the loser to his bungalow and we didn't talk about much, but basically,
Oh yeah.
why do you lose so much? But yes, it also, and it's obvious in your story, is that it elevated your potential.
Oh, wow.
Because
Big time.
that's
Big time.
surrounding yourself with people who who challenge you. That's what I always say. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to do more, to think bigger, to go outside the box, to, if it's physical, to strive for that next level that you want to be at. I challenge myself all the time. I mean, I'm in my 60s and I made a point that I wanted to learn how to do handstand, and I've been doing
Whoa,
it ever since. Yeah.
seriously.
So,
Well,
yeah,
you and
it's
I are
like,
from the same era, by the way. I didn't have emails and cell phones back in the day either. You and I have a lot of things we could talk about on the side, um, but I think that's really it. I mean,
yeah,
people that are big thinkers challenge your mind. They don't
yes.
settle for mediocrity. And that one week, again, I went undefeated that next year, and then became nationally recognized. And that was I really give credit for that one week I had with this amazing guy.
Wow. See, a person can make a huge difference, and that's why you just never know. Surround yourself with big thinkers or someone who challenges you. That's basically, I love it. Thank you for the story. So enlightening, and wow, you must have been like on cloud nine, thinking this is fantastic.
Well,
So
I've never forgotten it. And, listen, I've had interactions with other amazing people. And more recently, I have with interviews I've been doing. And what's interesting is once you learn how to gain access to incredible people, it gets easier.
yes,
One, because you become reputable and trusted by other people who are influential. And secondly, because you're not afraid, because you're
right.
willing to put yourself out there and recognize you have value to other people. And if you can recognize a value and you can start displaying it and then offering it and actually see results, like Larry Namer, who spends every week he spends time with people that need help, even though he doesn't need to, because he, amazing, very wealthy guy. I think it just defines your life in a much better way. That's all.
Absolutely. It certainly does. It defines your character for sure. Well, speaking of that, I know we touched briefly on leadership, but I had a question here. Do you believe there is a gap in leadership these days? And if so, how do we remedy it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I mentioned the first is Gallup poll that I've been following. Listen, Gallup does hundreds of polls, and they've been doing polls for
Mhm.
decades. They've been following leadership for decades. And in 2016, I think it was, or 2017, they came out with some results about the fact that employees leave their jobs, number one, because they don't trust their leaders. They leave leaders, not jobs. And they also identified that companies were not investing in people to make them leaders. That was the biggest problem.
Mm,
The biggest gap is that companies use their VP of client acquisition, their internal recruiters to go out and bring in great people, not thinking that it's possible to do it from within and have more loyalty than ever to do it. I'm a big fan of In-N-Out Burger. Where do you live, Jane?
I'm in Arizona, so we do have
Okay,
In and Out Burger here. Yeah.
so In-N-Out Burger, I knew them way back in the day when they were a tiny little chain. They do not hire managers for their restaurants. They only hire from within. So you start out flipping burgers or cutting fries. You can eventually become a manager that's making like 200 grand a year of a hamburger joint. It's pretty amazing. And
Wow.
so I think the biggest gap, I believe, and by the way, I don't have a problem with people hiring talented people from outside. I've been hired many times to come in and to restructure, to take a company, and roll it out. So I'm grateful for that. So I'm not suggesting that we should stop that. I'm just saying that we should pay more attention to the people we already have and give
Right.
them credit for the potential they can become. So in that survey of Gallup, they also asked companies, is it important to have a program to develop your people and help them become leaders? Because, by the
Mm,
way, a single performer who does well in their role as a stockbroker doesn't automatically have the ability or skill sets to become a leader over other stockholder brokers, right?
mhm.
So, so they all said yes, it's very important. But then, when they ran the polls later, only 5% of the companies were actually doing it. So I think
Okay.
there's a huge gap. I think companies are hurting themselves by not investing and putting money into their people, helping them become leaders and learning the skill sets that it actually takes to run an organization, to lead, to be an example, and to be influential. They're not influential. That's the problem. People are leaving their jobs because they don't believe their leaders are influential. They don't trust them. They don't think that they care about their interests, and they don't manage them very well. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind
No,
of.
absolutely. You hit on something really. You said they're not influential leaders. I was like, wow, that was a huge aha moment for me. You're right. They're not influencing them at any level. And that makes a huge difference. But what a great, you know, segue into what you're teaching, the difference of an influential leader. What you're absolutely correct. Because if you have a leader that's influencing you, it could be at a personal level, it could be at an educational level, it could be whatever it might be, you're more likely to hang around because you're with somebody who's thinking bigger and teaching you to do the same. So you're encouraging them and you're inspiring them, and they're saying, look what you can become, because they're influencing them. Oh my gosh, that just hit the nail for me. Yes, influential
kind of
leaders. Oh,
kind of the gist of the book. I mean, that's what we're really trying to do, is
right.
learn how to become influential in a very authentic way, using emotional intelligence, all those skill sets that I was talking about. And so that someday you can help other people do the same. It's a reciprocal thing. Some people help you. Why wouldn't you do the same for other people? I mean, it's really the idea.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, you reveal 10 success factors in your book. If you were to choose three top factors, what would they be and why?
Wow. So I've had people ask me this in the past. My problem with it is it's a very progressive track.
Mm.
So you start with, there's 6 spheres of influence and 10 success factors. We start with a perspective. We move to accountability, talk about spheres of influence. Then we progress to relationships, leadership, opportunity, and strategic influence. Embedded within those spheres are success factors. So if I had to choose 3, I'm going to choose the first 3. And the first one starts with having a survival mindset. As you get started in life, you start a journey, you start a project, you start a company, you start a relationship, you have to say to yourself, I'm committed to this no matter what happens, whatever life throws at me, I'm committed and I can handle it. That's my commitment. Number 2 is to have what I call a networking focus. It means you have to agree and accept the fact that people have to be part of your solution. You can't go it alone. You can't do everything by yourself. You were never intended to do everything by yourself. We're social beings. We're here on this earth together to help each other accomplish much more than we could do on our own through that synergistic model. And then number 3 is accepting personal responsibility for everything that occurs in your life. That's a hard one.
Mm.
Most people
Yeah.
can't get over that. You ask most people, does everything that happen in your life happen in a way that makes you responsible? Are you responsible? Are you willing to take responsibility for anything that happens? And most people will say, well, I'm responsible for about 50%, maybe. Some people 30%. Some people actually raise their hand and say, yes, 100%. So why do you say 100%? Because I'm responsible for the way I react to everything, how I respond, how I decide to move forward with everything that happens to me. Even if I was in a car one time on a freeway and a person had a heart attack and his car hit me. And there were cars honking all around me, and I was wondering, why are they honking? And then all of a sudden I saw this car coming right toward me, and I barely got out of his way. He hit my bumper, and then I stopped and called 911. But I wasn't responsible for his death. I wasn't responsible for what happened, really, but I was responsible for how I reacted to it. I stopped. I called 911. I made sure that nobody else was involved. I mean, it was my responsibility, I felt, to do something about it, even though I didn't cause it. There's a difference between
Right.
cause and reaction. Really big difference. So those are the 3 I think you have to start with, because without those, nothing else in my book works. You can't get to relationships. You can't get to opportunity. You can't get to strategic influence. You have to be willing to, count the costs up front. I'm willing to accept whatever happens, survival mindset. I know that people need to be involved, and I'm willing to make sure that happens. And number three, I'll take responsibility for whatever happens, whatever occurs in my life, and the buck, as President Truman said, will stop with me, kind of thing. So
Right. Yes.
that's my
I love it. Thank you. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. That responsibility one is one that's wow. That
it's a
in
hard one.
today's world, that's one that the next generation needs to really learn,
Amen.
if I could put it that way, in a very
Amen.
political way. Yeah, amen to
No,
that,
yeah.
right? Oh my.
I think
I'll just
I
get
think when they get
go
in their
ahead.
30s, they finally figure that out. But in their 20s, they're like, okay, I
Yeah.
can surf this a little longer. I don't know. I admire
You
all the millennials and the Generation Zs out there because they're smart. But I think, yeah, there's some principles that need to be learned.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely. I'll just tell you a quick story that I
please,
witnessed an accident where this guy on a motorcycle, he was driving very erratically. So I moved into another lane and I thought there was something wrong with him. But so he basically went through a red light, like everybody had stopped, and he just went right through it, and
wow,
he got hit by a car. I mean, gratefully he survived. I mean, he had his
okay.
helmet on. That's one thing, because here it's not a law. But and what everyone did, Gary, I was at the front of the stoplight, so I mean, I saw the whole thing. I was just like, "What is he doing? He's going right through the light!" And boom! And
That's
all these
scary.
people got out of their cars, took out their phones, and I thought, "Oh, they must all be calling 911." No, they were taking video. I called
Ah,
911.
seriously?
I didn't even think to put on my camera. And I was reporting it, and I was the first one because they didn't have any report of it. They didn't say, yes, we've got a number of phone calls. We understand where it is, blah, blah, blah. I was
Wow,
just shocked. I was
wow.
shocked. I was like, oh my God, all they're doing is taking video for their whatever.
Well,
Talk
somebody could
about
be
no
hurt and
response.
dying, and they're taking video of it. So there's a movie that just came out. I just saw it. My wife and I went and saw it. It's called Otto.
Oh, yeah,
And
with Tom
Tom
Hanks.
Hanks, it's amazing. It's a
Really?
story about a Scandinavian person that's called Uva. My wife has read the book, and she said the book's much better because there's more. But as far as the movie goes, she thought it was really well done. But remember, he's trying to. Well, you haven't seen the movie, right?
No, no.
Okay. Well, there's a place in it where somebody is in trouble, falls in front of an old man falls on some train tracks, and everyone pulls out their phone and starts videoing it. This
Mm.
train's coming. He's going to be killed instantly,
Oh,
but nobody is trying to help the guy.
how
They're just taking video of it. I
right.
just couldn't believe it until Tom Hanks saves the day. So it's mind-boggling to me that people don't want to take personal responsibility for anything. It's really
Right.
really
And it's a human
disturbing.
life, for
Yeah,
goodness sakes. It's not a movie. It's not for your feed so that you get more hits on your social media feed.
exactly,
Anyway, I that
exactly.
rings very true because I saw it happen. So yeah, that
Oh
was
my goodness.
very interesting. Responsibility is way up there. So the
Well,
future, what are
thanks to
you
you.
most yeah.
Go ahead.
So the question that I have for you is the future. What are you most excited about now in your life?
Personal and business. Personal is my grandkids, my wife, doing things, serving, doing some things that we wanted to do for years. We've kind of been starting those golden years, even though I'm not ready to quit. I think when people quit, they die. And so
So
I
do
think the
I.
best way to live a long life is to stay active. So that's on the personal side. On the business side, I'm writing a new book. I don't have a title for it yet, but it'll be a book that's related to my first book, taking a deeper dive, but getting more into leadership. And so I'm excited about that. I've already done the interviews. This time I'm only doing 4 interviews, and each interview will match one of the sections. There'll be four sections in it. And I'm also talking more about me in this book. Everybody asked me, why didn't you give any stories about you in your book, in The Power of
Hmm.
Strategic Influence? And I just said, well, I thought it was all about other people, and that's what I was trying to focus on. I mentioned one little thing about me in the book, and that's it. So this book, I've been asked to tell some stories like we've been talking about today, and I'm planning to do that. And then talk about my influential journey, the foundational influencers in my life, which were critical to me. So I'm going to talk about that. And then finally, I'm starting a new business. So I owned a company called Trustegrity, which was a national professional networking company. I sold during COVID before I wrote my book. And then my non-compete expired. And so now I'm starting something that's similar. It's called Strategic Business Leaders. And so we've just launched our first chapter, and we're going to be expanding, bringing business owners together, business leaders together that want to talk about strategic influence, want to talk about giving back, want to talk about their business plans, about helping each other. So it's going to be kind of a compilation of those kinds of things. The world is chaotic right now. And so trying to bring something down to the ground that we can all believe in and work together on and brings unity, I think is important. I think my book helps a little bit in that regard, because you were trying to structure relationships that are meaningful without being selfish and having a kind of a selfless attitude. So that's what I'm excited about. I mean, from a personal and a business side.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I can't wait to learn more about your new platform. It sounds fascinating. Well, after we'll get some information up there as well. So, any last words you'd like to share? Did we miss anything? I think we might have covered it, but go ahead.
Yeah, there's one concept I'll just share with you really quickly, and that is, I think if somebody asked me what are you really trying, what's the message you're trying to get out of your book? If somebody had to learn one concept, what would it be? And I think that is that influence and leadership cannot be self-proclaimed. So you can't stand up and say, I'm a leader, I'm an influencer, follow me. That's something that's bestowed upon you by other people. I think it's really critical to understand that concept, that just because you have a title, you have to still earn the right to be called an influencer, still have to be called, earn the right to hold that title that someone gave you because they thought you were qualified. So I think if anything that I can teach is that you have to earn the right, to be reputable, to add value to people, for people to respect you, to have that title of influencer. I think if I could get that message across, I'd be really happy.
Yes, absolutely. Earn their trust. It's really yeah. I agree with you. It's a title that needs to be earned. Well, because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, Gary, I have one last question. If your life were an epic story, what would the title be?
I'm following a little bit in the footsteps of my friend Gary Kennedy, but I'd want my tombstone, I guess, to say he tried to make a difference.
Oh.
Okay, whether I made a difference or not, I want people to know I tried.
Right, right. I would say he made a difference for sure. Thank you again, Gary, for joining us here today. Be sure to check out Gary's website at garyclaney.com and thepowerofstrategicinfluence.com. For Gary's social media links, go to the contact information on the Epic Vision Zone bio pages. We'll have it all there. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. And don't forget to reach out to me at janeapplegath.com, where you can access your free download, The Keys to Your Dreams. I look forward to connecting with you. This is the Epic Vision Zone, transforming your dreams into epic success.